Perfect. Right, so I think we've got 10 people. Maybe we'll just wait one more minute. The housekeeping won't be very long. So if you are just joining us, please feel free to pop in the chat who you are, where you are, and then we'll get started probably in 1 minute time. I've also popped an overview of what we're going to be going through today with sort of rough timings. Um, but yes, if you want to see that, that's just in the chat. And I think we may just get started. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are delighted to welcome you to our first student seminar. The session will be recorded. So if you want to have your camera off, please feel free to do that. But it's always really nice to see some smiling faces. So this is the first time that we are piloting a student-focused format within the network. And we're going to start this with three students from Yale University. And then we also hope to expand this to other students from other universities in future sessions. So today we will have three presentations. They will be roughly 10 minutes each. And first up, we have Maya Caine, who is at Yale School of the Environment, class 26. Then we will have Chloe Edwards, who is in Yale College, class of 26, and Lauren Lynam at Yale School of the Environment and Pace Law School, year of 26. That was quite a mouthful. And we are delighted to welcome Dr. Katia Vladimira Dayan, who is now the Deputy Mayor of forgive me, Katia, if I say this wrong. Is it Ferney-Voltaire? And Chief Research Officer at Post Growth Fashion Agency. So Katia is joining us today as our expert to support the students and bring all of her many, many years of experience at the intersection of policy and post-growth economics and sustainable fashion, of course. So during the presentations, just a little bit of extra housekeeping. Please do mute yourself in case you've got any background noise or any interference. And you are also welcome to add any comments or questions via the chat as the presentations go on. Or if you wanted to ask them personally, you can raise your hand or unmute yourselves after the presentations during the Q&A. So we're going to start off with Maya. So Maya, whenever you are ready, I will hand over to you. So Maya is, as I said, she's from Yale School of the Environment, class of 26, and her presentation is called Reimagining Resale to Unite and Strengthen Local Slow Fashion Communities. I will hand over to you, Maya.
Alrighty, hi everyone. It's such an honor to be here to speak about my work, and I'll just dive right in. I know that most of the community here is focused on research, so before I'm very much a practitioner, I'm a student entrepreneur, but a lot of my work is informed by my research capstone that I did in partnership with Michelle Gabriel, my advisor. So I want to give you a little bit of peek into that research and then share a little bit more of this culminating social enterprise that is called Helix. So, um, yeah, I'll go right into it. So, for my capstone, it's something I've been working on for the past year. The question that I sought to answer was, how has our current global fashion system reshaped U.S. cities, and what city-scale interventions can restore local resilience? I come from Columbus, Ohio, which actually had a huge like footwear economy that is largely gone. And it was really inspired to understand like other parts of the US that had large garment making, I guess, histories. What did it look like at these different phases of time? And then what are the current dynamics of what I call global extraction, the current time we're in fashion? So ultimately, this all culminated to this capstone called A City Blueprint for Building a Slow Fashion Commons, 9 actions to reimagine how cities build regenerative fashion systems. In no way will I actually go through all of this, but really the ambition behind the work is kind of creating a fashion system, reframing clothing as a shared resource, really centers community, long-lasting garments, cultural, local and cultural identity, operating within ecological limits, and really informed by the various frameworks and ways of thinking from ideas on the right. And ultimately, I painted this vision for the slow fashion commons, kind of working backwards from a vision of like what needs to happen, and then kind of created like organized the thinking around these 9 actions that have sub-actions within them. And so this is like a whole long paper that I wrote, but I'll move on to say like what I'm really proud of is kind of the social enterprise that came out of it. So going straight into this, and many people know this, we have enough clothing on the planet to clothe the next 6 generations. But looking at why is because of fashion's linear business model, which generates revenue through the rapid production and disposal of garments, creating this culture of wastefulness. We produce double the amount of clothing we did 15 years ago, or when the study was done, but utilize them and wear them 40% less, making fashion one of the most polluting industries. And Resale has really emerged as the industry solution to this problem. However, it's not solving the problem. Um, in a research study done here at Yale and actually led by network member Maitel, she found that those who purchase pre-owned clothing um, tend to purchase an increased amount of new garments, fueling overconsumption rather than reducing it. And so I took a look at a lot of these large, mainly digital platforms to understand the dynamics on like why they aren't actually leading to a reduction in new clothing. And I found that a lot of these platforms, clothing is really reduced to an anonymous commodity, completely stripping meaning of our clothing. And some platforms, like the more centralized, like ThreadUps, the Runways, the Real Reals of the world, really are very extractive, extracting money from local fashion economies. So local resale stores, care services, flea markets. And none of these platforms actually promote a culture of care, prioritizing transactions over repair and mending. So really, it made me realize that retail operates within the same extractive logic as fashion status quo, and is not designed for responsible consumption or garment longevity. So that is why my twin sister and I co-founded Helix to reimagine resale to actually create a culture of stewardship rather than wastefulness. And we are reimagining fashion in 3 ways: turning garments into living archives, anchoring fashion in local exchange and networks of care, and aligning financial incentives towards longevity. So let's start with turning garments into living archives. Um, Helix is introducing provenance into fashion by turning garments into living archives, which means tracing the human stories and memories connected to them as they circulate across new owners. Provenance theory, which I've really fascinated by, states that something ordinary can be extraordinary when it holds traces of the human experience. And we are bringing that to Helix by allowing users to log memories or stories associated with their clothing to transfer to the next owner, really creating this accumulation of memory, allowing each other to witness each other's humanity through our clothing. Next, is the second way we are reimagining resell is um, anchoring fashion and local exchange and networks of care. So Helix brings together the existing stock of clothing within a city. So think resale stores, personal wardrobes, curators, flea markets, independent designers, in addition to local care services who can extend the life of garments through tailoring, mending, dry cleaning, laundering, and really making it very easily to access all these items within a city. And instead of sending garments across the country, literally Depop, Poshmark will ban you from the platform if you try to meet up if someone is in your same city, if you don't want to ship. We do something different by keeping them moving within communities, and we do not have any shipping options. Unlike traditional resale, we really celebrate local exchange. And you can browse whatever is available near you, meeting locally to complete the exchange. Um, and yeah, this is a little bit what it looks like on the app. Lastly, the third and final way we are reimagining resale is through introducing completely new business model to fashion that we're calling the infinite commission model. If you were to list an item on Helix, every time it's resold or rented, you as the original lister gets a percentage of the transaction, similar to how royalties work in music. As mentioned earlier, the reason why fashion is so wasteful is because the only way to make money is by the rapid production of new clothing. However, our model decouples revenue from new production and shifts financial incentives towards longevity and continuous use. So this is a great time to talk about the business model. And that's how, and what it looks like is that Helix takes 10% stewardship fee collected from each transaction, and that's split evenly between the buyer and seller, which is significantly lower than a lot of resale platforms. Um, just for example, Poshmark has a 20% seller fee. And essentially, for first-time listings, this 10% pool goes to Helix. But for every resale or rental in the future, 7% goes to that original owner and 3% goes to Helix. So we allow sellers to create passive income from on the every garment that they introduce to the Helix ecosystem. Oops. Oh my gosh. Where's my um can everyone see I keep getting like a sorry, one second. Okay, there it is. So all in all, like our value proposition is very unique. There's nobody bringing community storytelling, local exchange, repair, infinite commissions, and all in one place. Um, and I just feel like we've co-designed this with over 60 different interviewees in the resale space, operating on the city level. So we're really proud of that. Something that I'm also proud of, being very active within the cooperative and democratized ownership space, is how we are structuring Helix to be a cooperative. Right now, it's a public benefit corporation. I know that's very U.S. Centered, like legal structure, but it's owned by me and my sister. But every year, operating, we'll be giving a percentage of the company to a cooperative where Helix members, people who sell their items on Helix, can be member owners. And our goal is to have this as close to 50%. I believe it'll be like 51, 49%. So I know I'm running out of time, but I'll just quickly say we launched. This was our pilot here in New Haven. It was very successful. It was called Helix House. And our really to just to be quick about this, and maybe you talk more about this in the Q&A, is like our next quest is expanding city to city. We're learning so much from our pilot, but we want to scale at the speed of trust. We are not taking any VC funds, non-dilutive funding in general. And we're just trying to find any sort of guidance on how to expand in a more ethical, community-centric way is top of mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was perfectly timed. So excellent. That really, really fascinating stuff. I'm sure there will be loads and loads of questions. I've already got a couple. But yeah, huge, huge well done, Maya. That's really fascinating. And I agree. I think it's something that should be in every single city all across the world. So well done. I can't wait to learn more. So next up, I'm going to pass to Chloe. And oh, excuse me, I'm just knocking things over in the background. So Chloe is going to present her work, which is called France's Anti-Fast Fashion Law, an analysis to determine federal replicability in the United States. So whenever you're ready, Chloe, I will pass over to you. And yeah, if you've got any questions as well, guys, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and then we'll come back to them later on. Over to you, Chloe.
Hi everyone. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. All right. Um, okay, so um my presentation today is on a research paper that I'm currently writing. It's called France's Anti-Fast Fashion Law, an analysis to determine federal replicability in the states. So I'll just get started. So I'm sure a lot of you are really familiar with all these statistics, but I'll kind of like just briefly run through the ones that I learned about and like how this kind of led to the formation of this paper. Um, Basically, I got introduced to like I guess sustainable fashion through like I like always had an interest in fashion, but learned more about like the sustainability aspect through like documentaries. And so I did like a deep dive on like learning more about like how much textile waste is produced, especially like with like I guess thinking about how it's not only produced but like continues to pollute the environment in like these like places like Ghana, and yeah, and I think that just like brought my attention to um yeah, just trying to figure out like how this problem exists and what potential um solutions there are. And I was a part of the Sustainable Fashion Colloquium at Yale this past year, and I became acquainted with Maitel, who Maya just mentioned, and she's like helping me with this paper, and she has like um, some background with like economics and then policy. So I became more interested in thinking about how policy could help this issue. Um, yeah, so. The bill itself, or like my paper to outline it, it's about like it's a very interview based, and then with different people who are involved in different aspects or like different sectors of the fashion industry. Um, and then I have been studying English along with French in college, so I'll be doing a translation of the law to like just have that out there in the world because I think it's very pivotal to have a full translation rather than work from a translation because only certain parts have been translated. Like there's a Forbes article that does a good summary, but it doesn't provide a full translation of the law. So I want to do that. And then the analysis part will be France's law and then some of the current policies on the state level in the US. So here are some of the people that I've interviewed so far. Maxime Bidet, Juliana Shen, Miguel Angel Huidar, and Megan Romano. And I feel like this lineup has like a good mixture of like policy experience and kind of like also like kind of under entrepreneurial experience, and then also like more production level, also entrepreneurial, and then law as well. And yeah, so I guess to kind of summarize the law itself, this law was passed. It's like called France's anti-fast fashion law colloquially, but the actual law is like very long and it's in French, so I'm not gonna like talk about that. But it's basically trying to I guess inhibit fast fashion in France and kind of like the EU as well. I think they're attempting to expand it, and it focuses a lot on like marketing and like taxing the different brands that try to sell in France. And I'm like for the law, I'm also looking at how the law was developed or like the laws that led up to this law, like having being able to exist, which are these two here, which is one about climate and resilience, and then one about like a circular economy. And also like certain different initiatives in France that I feel like are very interesting in the way that I did something of similar aim doesn't exist in the US. And one of these is this like reparation act, I guess like act you could call it that, where they were like helping people to they were kind of I guess kind of subsidizing clothing if people would come back to um like professionals to get it repaired, which I just think is really interesting. Yeah, and then the similar legislation in the US, one is the New York Fashion Act, which is still in the process of being passed. And it's based on a very similar law in California that was passed. And so the paper basically is attempting to um, and by analyzing France's law that exists on like a national level, what could be done here in the US to allow these state laws to exist on a federal level. Oops. Yeah. And so something like some different comparisons, France's anti-fast fashion law. Um, yeah, those are the things I just talked about. I think it's very interesting the emphasis on marketing language. One of the um aspects is to like kind of, I guess, eradicate like the usage of free. Like I think a lot of it's very common, as many of you know, that like fast fashion brands, but then also fashion brands in general will use like languages like, oh, like spend $50 and then get free shipping and things like that to encourage people to buy more. And so I think this like lo the language aspect of the law, I think is something that I find really interesting, and I kind of want to compare that with the different state laws. And then there's also this interesting aspect of targeting non-EU companies, which I can touch on a little bit more in the and at the end. But yeah, the New York State bill focuses more on supply chain, um, and it has like a very strict cap with it, which is brands that have a gross receipt of more than $100 million. And then a similarity between the two is this extended producer responsibility, is that they're both extended producer responsibility driven. So focusing more, um, yeah, on the producers than the consumers. Okay, and then I guess to kind of close, um, the reason the New York Fashion Act hasn't been passed is a large part due to current administration, but also brands in New York without lobbyists. And then industry support can be really difficult, which I think is, I guess, another aspect of this paper that I find really intriguing is considering like cultural significance, I guess. I think France has a very strong like or like fashion and arts are like just very integral to French culture. And then I guess that like in line with that is like the luxury sector that exists in France and is like a really huge part of their economy, which isn't the same to, well, it's not to the same degree in the US. And I just think that's something really interesting. And so in some of my interviews, something that's been brought up is like the how this kind of act can be helpful for the like environment, but also like it supports the economy, which I think is an interesting nuance that adds to it. And like when considering that, like how could yeah, I think it just like spot like kind of encourages more questions on like how like a policy like this would have to work in the US, because I think it would also have to have like that kind of business approach where it would have to like industry like the industry or just brands would have to understand that it would like benefit them financially, which I think is really interesting because the emphasis is less on the economy, I mean on the environment. And yeah, I believe that is all. And then my next steps, I guess, is that I'm just continuing interviews and trying to find more production based or people on like the more production level, and maybe people who I think a lot of my interviews are people who are very like into sustainable fashion. So I'm trying to expand that and just like get a more holistic view of the issue and what other people's like stakes would be. Um, but yeah, I that is all. And again, stop sharing.
Thank you so much. That was
Thank
just
you.
under time. Really fascinating. So much going on there. Excellent, excellent work. As we've got a minute, I'm just wondering if anybody does have a question, or you did mention that you could talk about non-EU companies. Again, there was, I think, is there a ban on, or the target of the law in France is on
The target
non-EU companies?
is the target is like what they're I'm trying to find a way to like kind of define like ultra fast fashion, because that's the
Yeah,
like the verbiage used in the I think it's kind of like definitely targeting Shein, and I think that's like a big one. But
yeah,
I think it's just interesting that that is like a Chinese company as opposed to like something like Zara or like yeah.
yeah.
So I think
Yeah,
that's kind
that's
of what I
really
was thinking.
interesting.
Yeah, because that's
Yeah,
something
yeah,
you
yeah.
could argue that they're kind of like close to the same level, but yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. Excellent. Thank you so much. And I've got probably a couple of questions for later, but I will leave those for later. Yeah, thank you once again so much, Chloe. That was so comprehensive and well, perfectly timed. So I'm now going to hand over to Lauren. So Lauren is going to be presenting her presentation today, which is called Fashion's Reckoning, Textile Waste, EPR, and the Shift to Brand Accountability. So whenever you're ready, Lauren, I will pass over to you.
And Chloe, this actually piggybacks a lot off of what you were just talking about. So I'll get more into the details of the EPR legislative proposals and the California bill. So this was actually kind of perfect timing. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, can you all see? Awesome. So, as we've talked about a lot today, we all know that fashion has a major waste problem. Excuse me. But more importantly, I think it has a responsibility problem. For a long time, the industry has operated on a simple premise: sell more, produce more, and let someone else deal with the aftermath. But now we're moving from a system where sustainability was largely voluntary and brand driven to one of legal obligation. And extended producer responsibility, EPR, is really at the center of that shift, especially when it comes to textile waste. So, to understand why the shift is happening, I think we need to look at the scale of growth. Fashion used to run on 4 seasons, and now there are 52 micro seasons a year. We're not designing for longevity, we're designing for disposal. And in the US alone, textile waste has increased by, I think, 80% or so in the last 2 decades. And only about 15% of those textiles are recycled. So even our solutions don't solve the problem. And a significant portion of that recycling is just exportation to the global south, simply displacing the problem. So this raises a question. If fashion brands are benefiting from overproduction, who will take accountability of the waste? Up until now, the answer to that has largely been whichever brand chooses to. A large theme right now in sustainable business is the shift from voluntary frameworks to mandatory regulations. And I think this is what's happening to the waste in the fashion industry now. Historically, sustainability in fashion has been governed by voluntary frameworks like the circular economy, sound transformative, but they rely on participation, not enforcement. And tools like life cycle assessments have given us better data, but they don't require better outcomes. And of course, we have industry groups to help coordinate, but they don't compel action. So what you get is a system where most responsible actors opt in and the least responsible actors can opt out. And that's not a regulatory system. It's a system for optional impact, but it doesn't scale to the problem this big. EPR changes that fundamentally. It takes responsibility for waste and turns it into a legal obligation. It applies not only to manufacturers, but for anyone placing products on the marketplace. So, importers, distributors, even retailers in some cases. And importantly, there are real penalties attached. So, we're talking daily fines, enforcement actions, potential market restrictions. So the question, it shifts. So it's no longer, do you participate in sustainability? It's, are you compliant with the law? A little background of how EPR works, just some level setting. So especially in the US, the states will set the rules, but it doesn't run the system directly. Instead, the producers fund and participate in something that's called a PRO, a producer responsibility organization. And these PROs handle the logistics of EPR, so the collection, recycling, reporting. And then the states kind of just oversee and enforce compliance based on what the PROs are reporting. So responsibility here doesn't just exist in theory, it's built into the system with funding, infrastructure, and accountability. So this slide has a lot of content. You don't need to read all of it, but I just will flag a couple of things here. California is the only EPR law that's enacted. Washington and New York are still state bills. Washington and California use a cascading mechanism to capture producer responsibility. So if there's no manufacturer, then you look to the brand owner. If not, then the importer. If not, then the distributor or real retailer. So it's kind of cascading. So somebody in the line there is going to have to take responsibility, whoever's the highest up. California's penalties are much higher than the others. It's $50,000 a day versus New York's $500 a day. So there's 100 times gap there, which, signals that the at least financial enforcement teeth are firmly in California. But to me, the biggest thing about these acts are the market bans. If you don't comply, then you lose access to the California or New York markets. And that is a revenue risk that I personally think outweighs any per day penalty figure. And you just think about where the fashion hubs of the world are. They are firmly in California and New York. You lose access to that. You lose so much of your growth. And then one more thing I want to point out is the secondhand exemption, and that rewards re-commerce. It's a carve out in the acts that create a structural incentive for brands investing in resale and circular business models. So, I mean, we've heard a lot about it already today, but I think that's just going to keep propelling. So, why does this matter? Once you frame waste management in this way, it becomes less about sustainability and more about three primary risks. The first is the regulatory risk through the fines that accrue daily. And the thing I think is the biggest is second, market risk. Because non-compliant companies can lose access to major markets like California and New York, this is a really big deal. California is the largest state economy in the US, and I want to say like third or fourth in the world right now. It's the single largest apparel market, and New York is the second largest, but it's also a global fashion capital. So the state carries outsized influence beyond just in-state revenue. And the third risk is reputational risk. So states publish who isn't meeting those obligations. So for fashion brands where consumer trust and brand equity are core assets, appearing on a public non-compliance list and the media coverage that tends to follow carries really big consequence beyond just the regulatory penalty itself. So at this point, ignoring EPR isn't just environmentally problematic, it's commercially ignorant. So shifting our lens to one of internal governance, what this means is that EPR compliance cannot sit in a silo. It needs to touch legal teams, the supply chain teams, commercial strategy, and it needs to be integrated into supply chain practices and contracts. So contracts need to clearly allocate responsibility. They need to determine who qualifies as the producer under the relevant law and how liability is allocated across the supply chain. Brands can also include indemnities, so it's a contractual provision allowed specifically under Washington's bill, so they can outsource responsibility through a formal agreement, financial responsibility, anyways. And I think companies also really need visibility into where and how their products are being sold. So, with the rise of third-party marketplaces, brand exposure will completely change. APR laws impose monitoring and reporting obligations that extend to how products move through the market after they were just initially first sold. So, that means brands need visibility into where and how the products are being sold and by whom. So, for example, online marketplaces in California are required to report annually on third-party sellers with over $1 million in covered product sales. So, you really need to be proactive about understanding distribution arrangements and how this interacts with these EPR requirements. So, taking a little step back before we close out, this is really a shift in how the industry defines responsibility. We're moving away from a model where sustainability is optional and one to where accountability is enforceable. And EPR is doing something pretty significant here. It's forcing producers to internalize the full life cycle of the products that they create. So going forward, the question isn't whether brands want to engage with sustainability, it's whether they're legally prepared to. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was truly insightful. So many amazing points there. I particularly loved your focus on the reputational risk because I think so much we often focus on the economics and the ecologics, but also I think consideration for reputation. This is something that we've been talking about since I've been into sustainable fashion for almost 20 years, but I think that's definitely the route that we're going down. But thank you so much. That was
Yeah, thank
so
you.
comprehensive. And I think I would like to ask questions, but I think I'm not probably the best person to ask questions on this topic, which is why we have invited our expert, Katia. So I wonder if the students would like to ask Katia any questions, or if Katia, if you have any questions for the students. We'll just have a kind of 10 minutes where we can have a bit of a free-for-all section. So if I ask maybe Maya first of all, if you have any questions for Katia.
Helen, would that be okay? Sorry, Maya, to interrupt
Yeah,
you. I wanted to give just a few phrases, general
yeah,
feedback, and then I'd be very happy to
absolutely.
answer. questions. First of all, thank you to the three of you. It's really a delight to see this kind of presentations coming from the States. I know what kind of political climate you're operating in right now. And I also know that working on sustainable fashion is like going against the tide, not only in the States, but all over. This is not a topic that is being treated seriously. So I know many of you already faced this, but you will be tapped on the shoulder and told, things would pick up for you and you'll find something else to work on. But the point is that most people still do not understand the scale and the gravity of the situation. So seeing that you're working now on policies, on social enterprises, on specific, efforts to make things better, especially in the States, really warms my heart. So thank you for that. I have specific comments to each one of you, but I would love to hear your questions first.
Yeah, I can go ahead. It's funny, I actually had a picture of us at the International Degrowth Conference, Katya, when I gave my poster presentation on Helix when it was just an idea. And I remember you were saying like, reach back out when the project is closer to like, being implemented and everything. So I feel like this is that. So honestly, I would love to get your feedback on like especially the role you just stepped in, your research focusing on city level, like slow fashion and sustainable fashion systems, just like adoption and like activation at the city level. I feel like this is the only way for me here in New Haven. I feel like I got a lot of support very quickly, very early on. But I know every city's different, so trying to figure out like a way to not replicate, but also kind of like find this like the city playbook that makes the most sense in our work. So that would be like my number one question. And
Maybe we start with that and then we'll do a tour de table. Should I, Helen, in terms of timing, should I answer first and then, or I take all questions and
Yeah, I
the
think the best thing would be to use this time for you, and then if we've got questions at the end, we
okay.
can go to those.
I'll
Yeah,
take
you
them
go
one
for
by one.
it.
I'll respond one by one. So Maya, yes, of course, our meeting in Oslo at the Degrowth conference was very interesting and memorable to me. It is really great to see someone whose eyes sparkle when she's talking about her project. That's not always the case, but it was your case, and you've clearly progressed. I hear what you're asking. You're asking about the municipality level. So let me first distinguish between municipalities and cities. Cities can contain multiple municipalities, and what would work best for you, I think, would be medium to larger cities, which contain multiple municipalities, right?
Mhm.
It may be a bit too much starting off with a large city like New York or LA or Paris, but starting with a mid-size, sorry, city would maybe make more sense, and getting support from for example, in Geneva, we have the main municipality, which is called the City of Geneva, and then you have different commune around it, which form the big Geneva, but each commune has its own, budget and its own person dedicated to working on sustainability, sometimes even sustainable fashion. And also each commune has its own group of elected officials. And these are two different kinds of people that you can talk to who can provide support. In terms of political vision, as you know, these are the delegates. Like right now, I'm the deputy mayor of our commune, responsible for ecological transition, and it's up to me to propose projects. I really want to create a vision for our town for 2040. And that's my project, that's my baby. I'm pushing through, and I'm doing this because I care. And then the employees of the city are supposed to help me. So you need to convince the people you need to convince are the elected officials, but most of them have no idea what you're talking about. They probably won't have the expertise. So it's about making them fall in love with your project, right? And doing so at the level, not going to the mayor of New York, but going, and I think you were talking about going through Boston or New Haven. New Haven is a human-sized settlement where you can make things move around. And starting with, yeah, a commune of, even 15, 20,000 people, starting with them and then bridging them around your, skeleton kind of a thing, and then creating the network out of multiple commune. This would be a humane scale for you to start with. And just a quick note here. I only recently saw, for those of you who don't know, I've been working in research on sustainable fashion and sustainability for many years. And then to my great surprise, I was elected in my local commune in France in March. And for years, I've been giving advice, policy advice to people around the world in different cities and governments on how to do things better. And it made so much sense to give this advice because, clearly this advice is given, so they should just be running to execute it. And now I see how things are from the other side, and it's very different. I am living through like such a disillusionment, and it's just, I will say it quickly, it's not easy for the elected officials. So by proposing to them, you also need to understand that they are surrounded by multiple constraints. Like they play politics, they have to do, many things that you are not aware of. And they have to be, take into account lots of considerations. But I think that absolutely and definitely working with elected officials and employees of municipalities who could bring you to the relevant elected officials could be something that could propel your project across multiple municipalities. I hope this helps.
Yes, thank you.
Chloe, maybe we'll
Yeah,
go and
Chloe, you go for it.
Hi, thank you so much for being here and being willing to answer questions. I don't have a specific question really, but I guess I was just curious because of your work with like consulting advising governments or like anything, any insights you might have with like working with like European, like countries in the European Union rather than the US, and like if you have any comments on like how I don't know, just like how the governments differ in a way that applies to like this like fashion sustainable policy kind of thing. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, well, the champions really at the EU level, France has always been the champion. So if you speak French and you're interested in this line of work, I think collaborating with French NGOs or French advocacy groups or consulting firms would be helpful. Like what you're doing already is quite in the right direction. Netherlands are also very active, especially in the second hand, in the policies around second hand and textile waste, because they have a major hub of sorting secondhand textiles in I don't remember where exactly, but it's not far from Rotterdam, just to ship stuff out of the EU. So Netherlands is one of the major exporters because they collect from most of the EU, and for them, textiles are interesting in the policy discussions from the point of view of secondhand. France, as you probably know, with this levy for small packages, they are not really, to me, they're not really addressing fast fashion. They're addressing really ultra fast fashion and specifically Chinese companies. France is a very proud country when it comes to their local production. So whenever, and I know the deputy from the government who brought this project, as soon as he drops the term Chinese companies, French immediately become outraged and they are willing to support anything to support France. So he really played the patriotic angle here, and working with companies French companies and French consulting firms on this policy would also have to take into account this cultural, aspect of things. Italy is another very active member, especially at the G7 level, because there are some conversations around policy at the G7 level. Italy has been the president in 2024, and they propose to create their own strategy for sustainable textiles. But Italy is pushed largely by their own textile industry, which is very rich and very powerful. As you know, the northern Italy, Milan, that region is still quite, has quite a lot of juice, and they push for basically status quo. And protection as much as possible on higher added value products. I would say these are the three most active ones. UK is much less active, and it's now out of EU. Helen is nodding. There's a lot of advocacy and passion, and people at the NGO level are pushing to discuss these things. But in terms of international or even national action, there's very little taken. I hope this answers your question more broadly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Lauren?
Yeah, I was just wondering how you think that companies need to be tracking these different regulations and managing all of that. It's pretty piecemeal right now. So what recommendations do you have for, with different states and different member states in the EU kind of developing their own regulations around this? How do you um, keep track of everything and make sure you're compliant?
In terms of, well, here it depends largely on the size and therefore geographical location or locations, the markets that the company covers. If we're talking about a small startup that's mostly selling in one country, they would know through regular means of, following the legal updates in their country. And sometimes the EU, once it comes knocking at their door. If it's a company medium to larger size that really operates across national borders, there are multiple ways of keeping track. There's Global Fashion Agenda that publishes regularly updates on regulations. It's quite a it's quite a painstaking job, so I prefer to just read what they write and rather than try to follow this myself because you have to follow updates in Brussels that keep coming up, the press releases for some recent conversations. But also, things at the national level, people try to obviously, this kind of stuff that people try to PR it, people try to make it heard and promote it as much as possible. So you get to know about things through media. I follow a particular, what's it called, the textile news? Eco-textile news. The media that shares. In my own case, as a researcher, I get news because I get invited to talk or to listen to seminars and webinars and participate in working groups. So sometimes I know about initiatives that are being developed just because I'm invited as an expert. But as for the company, yeah, having, especially in the States, what you have right now, I'm sure there are probably some consultancies or specific, resources that provide an update. If not, you should really do that. Make some money because it's really something that is very helpful. And again, I use the global fashion agenda because it's just I cannot follow everything and just like constantly go and check in on all the uh, emerging hubs.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess at the law firm I'm working at this semester, it's pretty much like you hear a news article and then figure it out and try and advise clients from based off of, what you hear in the news. And so I just was wondering if there was a more structured way to
Mm.
figure those things out. But it sounds like there are working groups and all.
Oh no, I mean, it's chaos. There are working groups that don't talk to each other. Sometimes they do double work. Sometimes they, discuss the same thing, but from different angle. But my favorite anecdote was that I joined in 2024. I was invited end of 24. I was invited to speak as an expert at a meeting setting up a strategy for sustainable textiles by the G7. And this was after, it was like years after EU discussed their strategy for sustainable circular textiles. It was 2 years after the adoption, after the revision. So we've really advanced quite a lot in the discussion. And then I come to that meeting of G7, and they're at the level of where the EU has been in 2020. And I'm like, why are we wasting all this time and resources? This has already been discussed. This, like most of these things have already been worked through. But because it was the presidency of Italy at the G7, they really wanted to come up with something else and their own thing. And their own thing was, two steps back, which is to say that, and all of the experts who are in G7 responsible for this had very little idea of what the EU has done on this, the European Commission and the European Parliament adoption. So there is no it's a disorganized chaos. There's no planned system. Some of them are, some of them talk to each other, others don't. And yeah, it's quite random at times.
Yeah, thank you for the insight.
Sorry. That is.
And do you have any questions, Katia,
I don't have questions as much as
or comments?
feedback. Yeah. Well, first, would I be able to get the presentations and contact details of the
There you
students?
go. We've got some contact
Well,
details.
ideally, Helen, if that
I can
wouldn't
gather them and I can send them to
yeah,
you. Yeah.
in one place, this way I
Yeah,
won't
no
lose.
problem. I can do that. So if the presenters, if you, yeah, if you email me afterwards, I will send a reminder though, don't worry. And then I can share with Katia.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I would like to keep in touch. And if you guys later on, publish something, don't hesitate to share. I do have a Substack where I publish once a month the reviews of articles that come out on sustainable fashion. And usually there's one, sometimes two policy papers. So if you publish something and please do signal to me this way, I definitely include it and it doesn't slip through the cracks. Some comments. So for Maya, I think that what I really liked about your framing, because it was not, I don't remember it being framed that way. Maybe I'm wrong, but when we met in Oslo, I don't think you framed it around resilience of cities. And now I think you're spot on with this framing and this first question, because how do you make cities more resilient? That's what Okay, and I'm sorry for saying this. We're staying in a friendly, close circle. This is what men are interested in. They're not interested in how to share clothes or how to get, where to get a t-shirt cheaper. They're interested in how to build resilience and innovation and social, social innovation, but it has to be innovation. This is the kind of framing and language that could help you get into the circles of policymakers and not only on decision makers who are not necessarily gonna treat this project as something. So you're building local resilience. I really appreciated that, and I just wanted to highlight this. And the Slow Fashion Commons, did you develop this framework, or did you take it from the what's that group name? The Commons. Did you develop the framework, or did you?
I developed the framework, but it was a lot of input from various different sources, like Eleanor Erstrom, my undergrad. She's like the person at Indiana University, so a lot of inspiration from her, but also like creative placekeeping, community wealth building framework. So kind of combining all that to apply it to fashion.
That was beautiful. That was a beautiful framework. I really liked it. I would love to, maybe even use it and coach you, cite you on that. I think it's a very helpful, very helpful framework. And I also last year again there was a lot that happened at that degrowth conference. Do you remember there were people talking about the fashion commons and they were doing the website? Maybe have you been in touch with them?
Yeah, I'm actually a member of I'm completely like I pay like $5 a month and they're exclusively in the UK and
Yeah.
it's more so like storytelling and sharing and they do some local events, but um
Okay.
yeah, very connected with them.
But it's good to be in touch. I'm so sorry. Hold on one second. It's my dog. Um, okay, great. Then for Chloe, I thought you are really onto something with your comparison, but it would be really helpful for. Do you speak French? Do you like conversely like are
Yes.
you fluent? Okay, great. I think it would be great for you to try to understand the context a bit more through the two laws that you mentioned in bonus réparation, and also read some analytics that exists in French on this, because um, I think the element that if you could add to your analysis the cultural element of
Right.
why this particular levy and that particular campaign, if you track also the Morel, I think is his name, the deputy who started proposing this. I don't know if you guys are aware, but the origin of the campaign, of the political campaign for this bill was an Instagram and a TikTok message by one of a young deputy, a handsome French guy living somewhere in Loire, married, and so he has several kids. And he ordered through Caine shoes for himself, a dress for his daughter, and something for his son, for his like toddler daughter. And then he took all of that and they took it to a chemical testing lab. And they found that the level of formaldehyde in the little girl's like toddler dress was like 5 times more, and stuff like BPA in his shoes were like all through the charts. So, and he's like, oh, this is what I ordered from, from Shane, and this is what I got, this amount of stuff that I have, that are so toxic. It comes from China. And as soon as, this came in, French people are very much, culture is very different. I lived in the States and I live in France, and I can tell you that there's a huge difference between how people perceive, what they're entitled to in terms of health protection, in terms of environmental protection, and a general kind of sense of solidarity. So introducing this cultural angle, I think, could enrich your comparison, and just, this is how it is in France. And you could say, and in the US, it's maybe more individualistic, and people are more counting on themselves when it comes to protecting their social, their health costs, and their health, and their lowering their costs, and whatnot. But yeah, generally, I think it will be a very interesting paper, and I'm looking forward to reading it.
Um, Thank you. What was the name of the deputy you mentioned?
Oh, his name is, I think, Valdemorel, something like this. Mora de Morel. I almost really bad with names. But you can find it. The guy who proposed, he's from Loire,
Okay.
Pays de Loire, and he proposed this. He was at the origin of proposing the initial bill, and then it went through General Assembly, and then it went through Assemblée Générale Nationale, and then it went to the Senate.
Okay. Thank you.
Lauren, your table was so impressive.
Thank you. It took a long time going through those regulations.
I could tell. Yeah, no, it was clearly very a lot of work that you put into it. Is there a paper coming out? Where can we read up on
No,
that?
this was just I used it for an in-class presentation for a final at my law school and was invited to this. I'm like, perfect, I can just reuse the presentation. But I'm happy to forward the information.
I think I mean, if that's in line with your longer term interests, you should publish it. You should definitely publish that, because it's something that is timely at the moment, and you could, it's in the process of happening, and it
Hmm.
will be different, but catching it will be like a snapshot of the time moment that you are sharing, and we really need that, because sometimes people wait to publish on stuff like this. They're like, oh, I will wait until it's adopted. I will wait until, it comes, until it's implemented. And then we lose the diversity of discussions, the richness. And
Yeah.
I think it would be beneficial to the society if you shared this.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I don't think it would be very difficult to transform slides and my talking points into a short article. I think ABA, the American Bar Association, is pretty easy to publish on, so maybe I'll do that.
And there is if you saw in Chloe's presentation, there was the anti-gaspillage, the waste anti-waste law.
Hmm.
Ever feel like doing a comparison, you could look at that law in France and see what are the approaches or the EPRs
Yeah.
in Europe. But just publishing on what's happening in the States is, I think, largely it's a very rich content. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for the encouragement. I appreciate that.
Oh, Lauren. So
Great.
my
Well,
side,
I
Helen.
think I think that is our time. So yeah, I would just like to say thank you once again to Maya, Chloe, and Lauren, and of course Katya. And I realise now that we're at the end that I didn't actually introduce myself and what I do here. So I've been supporting Samira with developing the webinars series. So just wanted to say thanks to Samira, but I've just seen she's popped off. So yeah, we will be having future webinars. So please do keep an eye out in the newsletter. And if there are any lecturers in the audience, or any lecturers that may want their students to present at future webinars, please do get in touch, because this is something that we're hoping to roll out beyond Yale in the future. So A huge, huge well done. I wish that I had even 1% of your confidence when I was your age, because you've all presented so expertly today. And, as Katia says, really, really on topic as well. So I'm just hoping that all of your peers and all of your friends have the same attitudes to sustainable fashion. And if so, it will be a much brighter future. So thank you once again. And I will share all of the information with Katia. I will connect with you all on LinkedIn as well, because it's really, really fascinating work. And just, yeah, huge
Thank
well
you so
done.
much.
Thank you
Well
so
done
much.
again.
Thank you for organizing
Bye-bye.
this. This was so cool. It was really nice to hear everyone's
Oh, no
what they're
probs, no
working on.
probs. Yeah,
Yes,
it's
thank
something
you.
that's
Amazing.
quite passionate to me. I'm a teacher, so I'm always like really enthusiastic for students to share their voices as well. So yeah,
And it's
I will
amazing to
just
have you on
copy.
board now for this project, Helen. I'm excited. It's the first webinar in
I
this.
know, I know. I presented last month as well. But yeah, it's been really great to be on board with the students and getting people from all around the world to listen to this research. And I also, one extra thing that I just wanted to say about your presentations today, guys, was that I think it's just a really, really good reflection of how diverse the network is, because you've got so many different aspects, and you all talked about either law, policy, designers, makers, producers. So, it's such a huge thing. I've been working in this space for quite a while, and everybody seems to think that I'm the expert. I'm the expert on one tiny little bit of sustainable fashion. It is so huge, and it's just great to see all of these different disciplines coming together. So excellent. Well done.
I
Well done.
agree. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you
Yeah,
again.
you too. And speak soon. I'm going to just stop recording and yeah, take
Everyone.
care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.